Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 95.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Herbaceous Sprouts, Cardcassonne, and On Tour, which we're putting on tap. We've got a 6-pack review of Keyforge, Call of the Archons, we talk about some cool new diversity initiatives in craft beer, and we asked our Slack channel what games they were wrong about. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. All is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Taking steps to get everyone involved.
Yeah, this week we are talking about a couple of different things that are taking steps to get everyone involved, be it Keyforge, who is changing the way that dueling card games are really set up in order to get more people involved, or definitely in our beer segment we are talking about some cool new diversity initiatives that I'm very excited to talk about. I am just ready to get into this week's episode.
Yeah, let's do it. So if this is your first time listening to Draft Mechanic, thank you so much for joining us. All of you returning listeners, we love you all as well. You can get in touch with us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual social media places.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild, that is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up there for this episode, as there is for every episode. So if you want to let us know something about what we're talking about, if you have an opinion that you want to share with all of our listeners, that is the place to do it.
Cool. I also want to give a shout out to our 9 new Board Game Geek micro badges. We have a micro badge available on Board Game Geek. If you would like it, you can go to our guild and click a link there. But big shout out to these 9 new people who picked up the micro badge. Poira, Chris McGowan, Steve Wren, Derek Scott, Zach Bowden, Paul Naxer, John Ottermatt, Chris Immershine, and Jonathan Dodd. So at a cool 78, that means we have 22 left to hit that goal of 100 micro badgers before episode 100 that I kind of just randomly set a few episodes ago. So thank you all so much who have picked that up so far. It's so cool to do this segment every week and see that continuing to grow further and further. If you are on Board Game Geek and you want to get the micro badge and you don't have the Geek Gold, just drop into a thread in our guild and we can hook you up. We got a ton of Geek Gold from the Board Game Geek end of year fundraiser, and I'm all for giving it out to those who want to pick up some micro badges.
Did you know that a group of badgers is called a seat?
No.
C-E-T-E.
Oh, okay. So not like a chair of badgers.
No, that would be weird.
It'd be very small chairs for our micro badgers.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we also do twice monthly meetups. We do one on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works. But our next one coming up is going to be our third Tuesday of every month meetup, and that is always at Salud Cerveceria. So we would love for you to come on down to the Noda neighborhood in Charlotte. They are upstairs above Salud Beer Shop, and they have amazing food now. They've got great beer. They've got some non-alcoholic options on tap. It's a good space. We would love for you to come out and play some games, hang out.
Yeah, we were just there the other day, and we had one of the Elevators pizza, which was a white sauce with gorgonzola and like a balsamic topping and
some onions and fennel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was so good. Their pizza's really good, and their menu is just getting started, so hopefully there'll be more in the future.
So that is Tuesday, February 19th.
Yeah, and if you want to, by the way, you can always hop on Facebook. We post all the events on Facebook there. If you follow Draft Mechanic on Facebook, you will see them, and you'll be able to get to them right there.
Good to know.
All right, so on to the news. Danielle, you actually have the news items today, so here it is, the segment. I toss it to you. Pass.
The first thing I wanted to talk about is actually something that is local to us, but I thought it was really interesting, and it was something I wanted to mention in case other people have this sort of initiative going on in their city or have any way to bring it to their city, because it was really cool. One of the things that Charlotte is working on doing is creating something called Circular Charlotte, and that is a circular economy. What it is it is attempting to remove waste from the waste stream and bring that back into profitable sources for the city. So, taking, in the example that we're going to be talking about, we're talking about taking waste out of the waste stream, and this is mostly working with Charlotte Solid Waste Services, so your trash pickup and that type of thing, and recycling programs. And one of the organizers of Potions and Pixels in Charlotte also works for Sustainability Charlotte, and he's started an initiative to help take things out of the waste stream and, through gaming, bring it back into profitability in the community and to teach skills to new people in the community. He's got 2 initiatives that are already set up that he's going to be working through, and I wanted to just touch on them because I thought they were really, really neat. The first one is going to be teaching people electronic skills through taking old CRT TVs and repairing them and retrofitting them to repair arcade cabinets. We've got a couple of bars in the local area that are arcade bars where you can go in and you pay whatever it is for your drinks, and you can pay to play a whole bunch of arcade games. They've got them all set up there. And those machines need repair. A lot of times the only way to repair any kind of monitor issue is to take an old CRT TV. And apparently every CRT TV that is gotten into the waste stream costs the taxpayers like something like $20 to recycle, because you can't put them in landfills. It's illegal. A lot of thrift stores and stuff like that won't take them anymore, but there's still a lot of these TVs that are out in the world. People have them. They don't just get rid of them. And the amount of CRT TVs entering the waste stream isn't supposed to peak in Charlotte until like 2030.
Oh, wow.
So we've got lots of years of these things, and we have really not a whole lot to do with them. And the taxpayers are spending he figured out about $500,000 a year getting rid of these dang things.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things they wanted to do is take some of these TVs out of the waste stream and teach people the basics of electronics so that they can, A, fix up these things and be able to provide them to the community for these arcade bars, and also they're being sold at some game stores because a lot of like classic video gamers like to play on CRT TVs because it's the authentic experience, and you can't really buy them anywhere. So they're hoping to teach people the basic skills of electronics. Like, they don't need to use those skills when they're done to fix CRT TVs. Once you have basic electronic skills, those are really transferable skills to a lot of other jobs in the community. So that is the first program that he has set up. The other program that they have is they had started previously to design this game, which is available on the web. I'll put a link in the show notes, to teach people how to recycle properly. What you essentially are given is an item, and you have to decide whether it needs to be trashed, it needs to be put into your recycling bin, whether you need to schedule a pickup for it for something like a mattress or something like that, whether you can bring it to a self-service recycling center, or whether you need to bring it to a full-service recycling center for things like, if you have computers or, like I said, those old CRT TVs.
Yeah.
So you sort all the products, and the object of this was to try and teach people to sort the recycling properly, A, to encourage them to recycle at all, which legally you're supposed to be doing, but also just to save contamination in different sources of recycling. Well, one of the things that they were thinking at Solid Waste Services is, why should we contract this out outside of the local economy? So they have a game design program that they are starting for not only video gamers, but also there are a lot of board game designers in Charlotte and board game design groups. So that they're trying to get all kinds of gamers to help design these programs to increase knowledge for the circular economy. And they are setting up not only panels, but also workshops and that type of thing to get all the different types of game designers and game playtesters and that type of thing in the community to work together and share those skills and find ways to share them with other people in the community. And this is all part of that Circular Charlotte program that they're getting started, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. Mike from Potions and Pickles is the main person that I was in contact about this, but there were so many people in the room for the first meeting of this that had so many cool different skills and were excited. There were people who were part of job placement programs that were working with it. There were homelessness advocates. There were people coming out of I think there are 2 different game design programs, CPCC, which is a local community college, and UNC Charlotte both have game design, and there were people there. There were professors from those programs. There were graduates. There were people who have local meetups, board game designers. It was a really exciting gaming place to be in, and to be able to see how people can help the entire community. I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really neat, and if anybody knows a way to get that started in your community, it was a couple of ideas that I think it would be interesting for people to know about.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to learning more about this over the coming months. I didn't get a chance to go to the meeting for this one, but hopefully it's a thing that we can get involved in and help kind of develop that in our community and help Michael out as much as possible. Really cool stuff. And you said you're going to be able to put some links in the show notes about all that?
I will put a link to the previously designed game for recycling sorting. They don't have anything up for the new program in Charlotte yet. I know they were planning to get their online presence live around April, maybe.
Okay.
They had to get some foundation meetings started, and since this is not generally something that Solid Waste Services was focused towards, they needed to get everything set internally forward. But I will put a link to that other game, which is good if you want to learn how to do recycling sorting. It's also really quick and super fun.
Cool. Well, we will follow back up on that as soon as we have more information. So cool stuff.
Our next piece of games news is definitely more applicable to the wider community. And it really has to do with what we're talking about this week as well, because a new set for Keyforge was announced. Previously, they had the Call of Archons set, which is the first red set that everybody's been playing with since it came out. Now they have announced Age of Ascension. This is going to have 204 new cards mixed with 166 cards from the Call of Archons set, which they said were favorites. So they brought back some of the older cards, but there are going to be, like I said, 204 new cards. Decks from both sets of cards can still be played and tracked on their Master Vault, which if you've played any Keyforge, the site that you log your decks into and you can track wins and losses, and if you are playing in Organized Play, it will track your Organized Play wins and losses for you. That is the Master Vault, so you'll be able to still use both sets. The new starter set does not come with standardized decks like the Call of Archons set did.
Okay.
Call of Archons one, you got 2 decks that were always the same in every starter set, sort of like a tutorial set of decks. The new starter set is not going to have those, and it's going to be about, I think, $25 retail.
Oh, that's not
so
bad.
it's a little bit cheaper, and you don't get those standardized decks.
But you get all like the tokens and stuff. And, okay, so you can still jump in then.
They are going to be including new keywords on the cards, but they will also use some of the older keywords, obviously, because they have some of the older cards. And I'm glad to see they're supporting this. They're coming out with new sets. They're increasing the amount of types of decks, because there are certain strategies that you can sort of come to with the cards that are already in the system. So now they're going to be introducing new cards and supporting this as well.
Yeah, I am going to be really interested to see, as we move into this, how this is going to change what decks people are using. Is everybody going to suddenly migrate to having blue box decks, or are the red box decks going to continue to be strong? If the blue stuff has new keywords and stuff like that, obviously there's no way you can retroactively add those back into your older decks. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
They may not include all of the keywords from the red set in the included cards that they have moving forward, though. So there may end up being some keywords that were only from the red deck and some that are for the blue deck.
Okay.
They are also saying that there is still a chance that some of the cards from the red deck that aren't included in those 166 cards can be brought forward as their Mavericks, which are some of the cards that can appear in any deck.
Oh.
So there may be a few additional cards that are occasionally in new decks. They're obviously not in every deck. You're not always going to get a Maverick.
I'm interested to see what that all looks like. I am really just, though, happy and a little surprised that there's a second set coming out so quickly. Usually some of these collectible-ish card games that Fantasy Flight has done didn't get the follow-up that they needed. I know a lot of people were really bummed out how Star Wars Destiny didn't get the support and product that it needed, but seeing that there's more Keyforge coming so soon, and that you've been able to get the Keyforge, the one-off decks pretty regularly over the last few months, it looks like they're really, really supporting this thing well. But I think we're going to talk a lot more about that later on in the episode.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Kickstarters. Danielle, I'm going to give you more work to do. Do you want to do the Kickstarter updates again?
And we've got a lot of Kickstarter updates because a lot of our projects from 2 episodes ago hadn't ended last episode. So let's get into it. Suburbia Collector's Edition from Bezier Games has finished. It is at $1,806,651 of its $10,000 goal, with 12,428 backers. So they
huge.
Absolutely blew that goal away. I'm not sure $10,000 was actually ever a reasonable goal, but even if you multiply that by a fairly strong factor, they blew that goal away.
Yeah, that's huge. Good for them. That's a big number.
Tiny Dice Buddies Apparel from Double Feature has finished with $3,153 of their $392 goal, with 54 backers. That is a much more modest campaign, but it was well above what they had wanted. That's almost 10 times their goal. So I'm excited for that. They are very adorable, and I'm looking forward to my sweatshirt. High Rise from Formal Ferret Games has canceled their campaign to relaunch at a lower price point due to feedback from people who are looking at backing. They are going to be relaunching with the non-plastic building components because that was really what was driving up the price point on their campaign. You were able to build 3-dimensional buildings with the different floors that you received in the game, but in order to make those and to ship those, it was really driving it up. That's why I think it was like $100 price point for the game. So Gil has taken the response that he got in the launch, and he's going to pull that down. He's pulled it down, and he's going to relaunch it at a lower price point with less ambitious components.
Yeah, I am a little bummed to see that because, you know, the physical version with all the 3D building pieces, it looked super cool. But I also trust Gil. He's a smart designer, and he's knows what he wants to accomplish with this game. And he got back hard at work pretty much later that day to reformat the game to have a different kind of way to build these buildings. And I know he's very excited about the direction he's taking and hopes to relaunch hopefully in the next month or two. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And I know I will be there day one again because the game itself is still freaking fantastic.
I know a couple of people had commented, can we still do a deluxe backer level that has these 3D plastic components? And one of the things he was saying was that just to tool for those plastic pieces was something like $20,000.
Yeah.
And he wasn't sure that he could offer both of the price points on the current campaign. So we're going to have to see where he comes out when he relaunches this. But keep an eye out for High Rise relaunching sometime this year. Rival Restaurants from Gap Closer Games is funding at $237,503 of its $30,000 goal, with 3,199 backers. This one is still going if you are listening to this when it comes out, but it ends on Tuesday, February 19th, so you have like one day to go and back this if you still want to do it. Mm-hmm. Reunification, a letter writing game about reconciliation from Travis Hill and Presspot Games, is funding at $2,202 of its $500 goal, with 183 backers. This one ends on Thursday, February 21st, so you've got a little bit longer to back that one if you'd like. And that is, just as a reminder, that is an RPG that is done through letter writing.
Yep.
And finally, our last update is going to be that 1001 Odysseys from Asmodi Games is funding at $107,028 of his $50,000 goal, with 1,410 backers. This is ending on February 28th, and let's talk some cat talk. If you've looked at the creative team for this, Ivy is the most like the live studio cat, but Roast Beast is the greatest name for a cat ever.
That is amazing.
So, cat talk in that update, because I wanted it.
Yes. I'm really excited about 1001 Odysseys. I'm glad that the funding is going well for that because I know that they have a lot of additional content they're looking to put into that, and it looks like it's going to be quite the journey playing that game.
So why don't you tell us about some new projects?
All right, I'll take over from here. So first up, I have Wavelength, which is coming from Alex Haig, who is the guy who created Monikers that we're big fans of. Wavelength is currently funding at $142,000 of its $30,000 goal with 3,843 backers. This one ends on Friday, March 8th, with an estimated delivery of October 29th of this year. There's only one backing level. It's $29 to get the game. And Wavelength is a social party game co-designed by Alex Haig, Justin Vickers, who are the creators of Monikers, and Wolfgang Warsch, who you may have heard the name of a bunch last year. So Alex Haig loved The Mind so much, designed by Wolfgang Warsch, that he immediately reached out to Wolfgang to do a co-design, and what they came up with was this game called Wavelength. Basically, it's a two-team kind of social party game where one player on a team is trying to get their team to turn a dial on this central component to match a hidden bullseye by using a spectrum. So basically, you have a dial that the psychic player is going to set between one range and the other range, and they're going to cover it over, and they're going to have a spectrum card that's something like what's halfway between pointy and round. Or maybe the card will be like smells good on one side and smells bad on the other, and they set it at 80% towards smells bad. So after setting that dial wherever they want, they're going to cover it over, and they're going to give their team a clue. So for example, something that's 80% smells bad, maybe they'll say gasoline, and then their team is going to try to decide where to place the dial to hopefully match up with that secret bullseye. The other team, of course, can try to distract or give false clues or just confuse it a little bit so that, I don't know, we really love gasoline. Gasoline smells super good, and they try to get people to put it closer towards something else.
Gasoline does smell pretty good.
I know. Maybe you're that 20%. But the way that the game is going to work, obviously you go until they've made a decision, they've placed the dial, you reveal the bullseye, and if your team was on the same wavelength as you, you're going to get a bunch of points and pretty much continue on like that, and you're going to high five and do all the things that the mind makes you do when you do get all of your cards in the right order.
Honestly, this is exactly the type of game I like to see from Alex Haig.
Mm-hmm.
He's done 2 games that we really liked so far.
Mm-hmm.
We liked Monikers. Obviously, we own so much Monikers, which is really taking Time's Up and redoing that in his own certain way. And then he did Pitch Deck, which is a lot like Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity without some of the problems of Cards Against Humanity and some of the boringness of Apples to Apples. So he's really good at taking something that is already an established sort of game and then bringing it into his own and really giving it a punch up in a way that is really unique to that game's design. So I'm excited to see the idea of like taking the idea of the mind and giving it a punch up in their own direction that is this Wavelength game. I'm excited to see what comes out of that. And I've liked the other 2 games he's designed. I'm cool with this.
Yeah, he's one of those creators that I follow on Kickstarter, and pretty much the second I get the notification, I know that I'm going to be able to hop on there and get a cool and unique party game that isn't just about saying bad words and making people feel uncomfortable. Wavelength just looks freaking awesome. The graphic design looks excellent as well. $29 price point is also really good for something like this as well, for such high quality components. And they're going to add a lot of these spectrum cards and also give you some blanks for you to write your own spectrums to come up with your own crazy ideas.
The other thing I will say is Pitch Deck wasn't super available after the Kickstarter. So if this is something you are interested in, I'm not sure if Wavelength is going to be available at different locations. Maybe the involvement of Wolfgang Warsch is going to increase the availability, but I can't guarantee that. And knowing how good Pitch Deck was and the fact that it wasn't really available, this might be the kind of thing you want to get in on the Kickstarter.
Wavelength, get at it. All right, the other Kickstarter I have to talk about is In the Hall of the Mountain King, coming from Burnt Island Games. This is funding at $111,000 of its $30,000 goal, with 1,749 backers as of time of recording. This is ending on Thursday, February 28th, with an estimated delivery of December this year. Good luck. $48 to back it for the base game, $64 for the deluxe with the components that you really want. And In the Hall of the Mountain King kind of combines a tiered card-based engine-building resource production engine with a tile-laying, with a tile-laying, tunneling, and spatial movement puzzle. Basically, things that I like a lot.
You do love tunneling, I guess.
So you and all of your other players are reclaiming this mountain hall, which is just this giant grid-based board that kind of looks like a, tunnel underneath a mountain. And you're building tunnels and moving and creating statues and building great halls once you get a bunch of tunnels near each other to get a bunch of points. The cool thing about this is that the spatial maneuvering, you all start in your own corner of the board, kind of like Blockus. You know Blockus?
I know Blockus.
And as you build out your tiles, you're kind of doing it like a Scarabia or something, where you're placing it so you must always have one side orthogonally adjacent to another side of a tile. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's how Scarabia works. As opposed to Blockus, where you have to connect on corners. But as you're building in towards the center of the mountain, your neighbors cannot be adjacent to your tunnels, so that they can come to like a diagonal point touch of another one of your tunnels, but they can't have a side-to-side sharing. So you're going to be continually moving around each other and kind of working your way in, because all of the biggest point areas are obviously in the middle of the mountain. Combine all of this with this resource generation engine where you're getting these troll cards that will go on top of your personal player board, and you're going to be building up from a 4-wide stack of cards at the bottom, a pyramid up to the very top. And then as you generate different trolls in your generation engine, anything below it will generate resources as well. So you're building an engine and getting these really cool chains of resources and stuff like that, while also maneuvering on this central board. Also on the central board, you have movement of statues. You're unearthing statues, and you're trying to get them built and placed up on pedestals. And you're also unearthing workshops that allow you to convert resources on the actual board, depending on what tunnels you have adjacent to it. And it's just this really cool system of interlocking mechanics and stuff that looks like it's going to be a fantastic game. I had a chance to walk by and take a look at this at PAX Unplugged and just kind of wrap my head around it and look at the way that the different pieces work and how it's all going to lay out on the board. And it's something that I've really been waiting for, and I'm really excited to see this game. They've already unlocked a bunch of new stretch goals, including a 5th player, which to me is honestly a little interesting, especially when you have a square board. I don't know how you're going to get a 5th player in that.
I'm sure that they have considered that.
That is probably a thing that the game designers have designed, and that they are smart game designers. But yeah, it also is supported by art from Kwanchai Moria, which did the box. He did the box cover, and he also did a lot of the other artwork throughout. The deluxe edition has game trays inserts and also really good component quality. Burnt Island Games previously did Endeavor, so if you are familiar with the production of Endeavor, the reprinting of that delivered about 2-3 months ago, it's going to look very similar to that. Was that 2-3 months, or was that longer?
I feel it was longer than that.
It's been a minute. It all kind of blurs together. But yeah, really high quality production at a honestly kind of affordable price. I expected this game to be more than $64 US, when I saw the initial components and what they were aiming to do with it. So I'm super excited about this game. I've been excited since I saw it at PAX Unplugged, and it's something I'm going to be really keeping my eye on. So if those kind of synergies of different stuff sounds cool to you, I super encourage you to go check out In the Hall of the Mountain King. It's at a pretty reasonable price point and looks like it's going to be a beautiful and exciting game to play with a lot of crunchy bits.
Cool.
So I think I'm just going to keep it at 2 Kickstarters for this episode. We have kind of developed that backlog in the preview.
I was going to say, you mean 8 Kickstarters?
But I think it is time for us to move on to some other games that we can talk about in recent plays.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic for t-shirts. So, recent plays.
Before we go on to recent plays, I wanted to take a little detour, if that's okay.
Okay.
Do you want to know where I want to go?
Sure.
I want to go into the CarcaZone with a recent play. Is that okay?
I mean, yeah, that's not really a detour. That's just where we're going.
Yeah. But, it's just like, I'm just trying to make this thing work.
Okay.
We can only do so many CarcaZone games before it, is obvious that we're about to go into the CarcaZone again. Danielle, tell us about this week's odd installment of the Carcassonne, if you would.
Well, this week we are talking about Cardcassonne. That is a 2009 release from Rio Grande Games, which plays 2 to 5 players in 30 to 45 minutes. The designers are Karl-Heinz Schmiel and Klaus-Jürgen Werder, of course.
My boy.
The artist is Klaus Stefan, and this is a game of set collection, push your luck, and who put all these cards in my Carcassonne?
Well, I'm going to guess that Karl-Heinz put all these cards in your Carcassonne.
Yeah, I mean, Klaus-Jürgen Werder has been doing pretty good at doing Carcassonnes without cards, so...
So for those of you tuning in for the first time, we've been reviewing every Carcassonne game ever for almost about a year now, and we're starting to get to the weird ones. So we have Cardcassonne, which is a Carcassonne card game. If you are a regular Carcassonne player, then you know what to expect in this, and then you will be completely shocked because it is literally nothing like Carcassonne, except the fact that it has 4 different colors of features, which I guess isn't really true either. This is going to take some unlearning for me to kind of talk about Carcassonne with you, so bear with me real quick. Instead of having all of the tiles that you're used to and placing your meeples on the tiles and scoring features and stuff like that, what you have is these 4 kind of large tiles that make up a scoring track. And each of the different 4 tiles are a different color that is based on one of the 4 different features of Carcassonnes. So you have the bottom tile that has the score tracker between, I don't know, like 10 and 30 or something, and it's the city row. And then the next one up is the fields row, and it goes another 30 or something. The next one is the road row, and it goes another 30 or something. And at the very top, you have the cloister row. The order of them doesn't really matter at all, except for the fact that that's the way that the score track fits together. That just happens to be the order that they're in. And each of them has a different color. The city is blue, and then field is green, road is red, and cloister is yellow. And that's kind of one of the very few ties into old Carcassonne, or normal Carcassonne, that you would expect.
Well, I mean, there is one more visual tie that brings you right back to Carcassonne. You do have meeples.
Very true, but meeples is the lowest number of S you could possibly put on this. You have a regular you have a small size follower meeple that is your score tracker, and then you have a large meeple, which is the one that you will actually using during gameplay. So in that way, it does kind of have a Carcassonne tie, in that at some point you are placing meeples onto cards to get cards. But yeah, it's, again, weird and not anything like normal Carcassonne. So the other big component of this is obviously the cards. This is a Carcassonne card game, so obviously you're expecting cards. And you're probably thinking, okay, so on the cards is going to be different features and stuff that I'm going to then place a meeple on to get points. But no, not at all. In fact, the cards are in 4 different colors, which match up to the 4 different rows, and each kind of card is going to have either people on it, or buildings, or animals. And what you're kind of doing is you'll have your hand of cards, and turn by turn, player by player, you're going to be placing one card out onto its color row, and at some point you're going to decide, instead of placing more cards, you're going to place your meeple on the last card in a row, claiming that card and all cards before it, up to either the start of the board or another meeple in that row. Like if somebody jumped into the cloister row on the 4th card, and I continued to play, and maybe on the 7th card or something, like, oh, these last 3 cards are great, I'll place my meeple there and then claim those cards. after you place your meeple, you don't get to place your meeple anymore, but you do still have to place all your cards, which is where that push your luck comes in. You might decide, I'm going to jump on this row because it's got a bunch of good stuff, and then other players were holding out on playing anything in that particular row, and then all of the better cards come out even after that. So you kind of got to push your luck and decide what you really need. But why you need those is kind of a set collection thing. So you have different things that are worth different points. The person cards are just worth straight points. You're going to be multiplying the sum of the person cards, they're 1, 2, or 3 points each, times the number of person cards you claim on that turn. So if I claim a 1 card and 2 cards, that'll be 3 people times 5 total points for 15 points. There are the building cards, which you're going to be putting kind of face down underneath a chest in front of you, a little chest kind of cardboard token.
That's where I always keep my buildings, in a chest.
Underneath the chest. And you're going to basically be going for different set collection things there. You want to have different, one of each color is a full set that will get you the most points. And you can obviously score multiple sets depending on what you have. And then the last kind is the animal cards. And what you're going to be doing here is a set collection of the same kind of animal. These are going to be visible in front of you. And anytime, or at the end of each round when you collect animals, you're going to score the animal you place on kind of just like a pyramidal scoring scale. Those stay out, and if you get more of that animal in the future, you're going to score additional points for the entire stack of that animal. So it's going to continue to stack up as the game goes on. Each of the different colors have all of those different things in them, and there's also a few additional cards. You have some jokers that can go in any row, and they are wild. You have 4 wild animals, 4 wild buildings as well, and then there's just some blank cards, I guess, because they needed to have a certain number of cards to do the printing. The last thing that's kind of interesting about this is that the very first card of each round that you play, you must play face down. And this is the one opportunity you have to play something not in the row of the color that it is. You can play a road red card into the field row face down for your first turn, with the knowledge that whoever gets that row can choose to either assign that card as normal, or they can choose to just score 10 points for it being a card out of its correct area. So you might place a card face down and, know that it's there and kind of shortchange your row with the knowledge that you can flip it over and get those 10 points. But obviously, push your luck. Maybe somebody else is going to grab that, or maybe that card row doesn't go exactly like you want. So you're going to continue to go. The number of cards that are in the deck, depending on player count, you get a certain number of cards per round, so on and so forth, until the end of it. And you've played Cardcassonne, which is just weird.
Yeah, it certainly is not like any other Carcassonne that I can think of, and I can think of a lot of Carcassonnes.
But I think the thing that's weird about this is just the Carcassonne name and branding, because the game itself is not exceptionally strange. Just knowing that you're doing a Carcassonne game with all of these things is kind of what makes it strange to me.
I mean, in fairness, how many games have had the card game come out where the card game isn't actually what you're doing in the full board game, though?
No, that's very true.
It's just the fact that we've played so many Carcassonnes, and there are so many Carcassonnes that work off the same mechanics, that makes this feel weird, because you're so used to different types of things that are all linked together by the main Carcassonne mechanics. Like, usually when we start one of these, we start, if you've never played Carcassonne, you play Carcassonne by doing this, and this is how it's changed in whatever Carcassonne we're talking about this week. But you can't really do that in Cardcassonne, because it doesn't really matter how you play regular Carcassonne. It's not relevant other than the fact that there are different types of terrain or buildings, and you have meeples.
Yeah.
And a score track.
Yeah, it's tangentially related, but I feel like this is honestly an interesting game. It's one of these things that we were playing this at Whose Turn Is It Anyway, and we played a 2-player game to just kind of get a feel of it.
Don't play a 2-player game.
No, it's not very good.
I'm going to say that now.
But we played it at 4 players, and we were all really surprised how enjoyable it was. Just that one element of having a card face down made your play interesting, because you never really knew what that card was going to be, especially if it was somebody else's. And a number of times throughout the game, I'm taking my own pile just to get that face down card, and I find out later that I really kind of shortchanged myself because somebody else's super great stack of cards turned out to have exactly what I needed because of their face down card, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of interesting kind of maneuvering that comes out of that in this game.
I think a lot of it also comes from the fact that the animals in the buildings are scoring in opposition to each other. Mm-hmm. Your animals score when you get a lot of the same type of animals. And the types of animals correlate with the colors. So pigs are always green, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And horses are always red. So if you're trying to collect a lot of the same type of animal, you're going to be going back to the same color. but buildings score in sets of differing colors. So unless you can get a wild card in there, taking the same row over and over again is going to hurt you on your building scoring. And you're not allowed to look at your buildings once you put them in that chest. You have to remember what you've taken throughout the game, which you're probably not going to. So you want to vary the columns that you're taking in order to score high on buildings, but you also want to get a lot of the same thing to score well on animals. Now you can affect that a little bit with your face down card. I could take a horse card if I'm collecting horses and put it in the yellow row, which is not something I've taken, and that way I will be able to get the animal I want and also a different kind of building. But since I've put my face down card in that row, it is sort of flagging it to the other players that there might be something good, there might be something you want there. So the likelihood of me getting that, it goes down a little bit.
I think it also complicates it a bit in that you are required to play your first card face down. So it might be, I didn't really want to place this face down, so I'm going to put down a card that is in this row and doesn't matter a whole lot, just so you think it's something cool. It's a fun little back and forth. The fact that you have to rather than you get to makes it a little bit more interesting to play with.
The other thing that I think adds a lot of interest to this game is the fact that you are essentially pushing your luck to see how much you can get without wanting to give up some really good cards. So, since everybody is playing all of their cards every hand, when you take a row, you're essentially hoping that everybody has played all their good stuff in that row. But a lot of times, if I've already placed my meeple, it's so fun to watch and wait and see when somebody else places their meeple, because hopefully I'm holding a handful of cards that go into that row, and I'm able to place them out, and they won't be able to take them. Now, those cards will stay out on the following round. You take any cards which are claimed, but any cards which are unclaimed at the end of the round stay out on the tableau to be added to on the next round, unless you're playing the last round, obviously. So hopefully I've got a handful of cards that they haven't been able to claim. I'm going to put them out, and that's going to give me something that I can hopefully get next round if it's good for me. But you never know when somebody is going to place their meeple, and you have to keep either playing a card or placing that one meeple that you have every turn. So it's entirely possible that everybody plays chicken long enough that most of the cards get out there, and you have to try and claim whichever row works best for you.
Yeah, it was really fun in the games we played to see how that pivots as the game goes on, because in the very early part of the game, we were placing our meeples very quickly, and then as the game went on and we got more comfortable with the other players, we do start pushing our luck a little bit more, making those final rounds a little bit more exciting. I'm also really glad that at a higher player count, it scales down the number of rounds, because like we said, when we play this thing at 2 players, it drags so long, especially because you and the other player know exactly what the other one is going for. You're going to just have this back and forth where, like, oh, I'm going to get all the red cards this turn, or I'm going to wait until you can't, take any more cards, so on and so forth. It's just not so great at 2, but definitely I would recommend playing it more at that 4-player level.
Yeah, I would also agree. A higher player count. This is not, like, the best card game I've ever played, but it is certainly one that I would bring out because of how easy it is to teach, and how there are interesting decisions to make every time you place a card or a meeple or something like that. It is fun. It's a quick teach. It's not Carcassonne's gift to the world, but it is a cool game, and I like it.
Yeah, and some background on it. This came out back in 2009, which was kind of a weird year for Carcassonne. They also had My First Carcassonne came out that year, and also Carcassonne Wheel of Fortune, which is basic Carcassonne with its own kind of like special start board kind of dealy. We got to find that one still at some point too. But it just got the one printing, so you have to kind of look around for it. Apparently, I just checked on Amazon, and there are some copies from a reseller on Amazon that are between like $20 and $30, so it's not super expensive. We found it at that awesome game store up in Delaware. It was the Days of Nights, and they had like 10 copies of it in shrink. So
did they? Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of Cardcassonne sitting around there. It's one of those games that like everybody, it came out, people are just like, meh, okay, which is, understandable. And then people who are obviously deep into the Carcassonne like us are going to be looking for these kind of oddities, and it's a surprisingly decent game. It's not as bad as some of the spin-offs like the Dice game was atrociously bad. And this is a game I actually enjoyed, and I would like to play again.
I will say, the cards in this game are mini cards.
Yes.
So if you don't like having a handful of mini cards, I know some people think it's really fiddly and just difficult to hold and show. This is a box full of mini cards, so you're not going to like that.
Yeah, well, that is Cardcassonne. It is a game that exists, oddly, in the Carcassonne. Let's move on. All right, let's move on. Danielle, we have a Kickstarter project that recently delivered we've been playing called Herbaceous Sprouts. This is a 2019 release from Pencil First Games. Plays 1 to 4 players in about 30 minutes. This is designed by Eduardo Baroff, Steve Finn, and Keith Mateka, with art by Benjamin Schulman and Beth Sobel. It is a game of set collection, resource drafting, and an ice-cool glass of lemonade.
If you've played the original card game Herbaceous, this is going to look kind of familiar, but they've added dice to it. So in Herbaceous Sprouts, you are, instead of planting in your own private garden, you are all planting in the community garden. And you're going to be planting in ways that are, again, going to sound really familiar. You're going to be planting groups of the same herb, you're going to be planting groups of all dissimilar herbs, and you're going to be planting groups of dissimilar pairs of herbs, so 2 sage and 2 tarragon. The thing that is added in Herbaceous Sprouts is you're also going to be planting flowers into the flower garden. And all of your resources throughout this game are going to be gained through dice instead of through card drafting. There is a deck of cards, but the card deck actually establishes which dice are going to be available each round. In a 2 or 3 player game, we are not familiar with the solo rules. I do want to say this game does play solo, but we have not played it solo. In a 2 or 3 player game, you're going to be putting out one more card than there are players that are in the game, and the cards will dictate either a number of dice or a number of dice and a special tool ability that can be used on when you draft that card. If there are any dice spaces, you're going to draw dice out of the bag, and there are a couple of different kinds of dice. Some just have herbs and flowers on them. Some have additional tools that you can use to plant in different ways. But you're going to pull dice out of the bag and roll them and place them onto each of the cards that have dice spaces. Then you are going to be taking turns drafting one of those cards, and you will get the dice that are on them. If they are herbs, they just go into your wheelbarrow, which is where you store your resources, and they can be used to plant into any of those 3 gardens that I have said that for herbs, or if you have a flower, it can later be planted into the flower garden, but you're going to need specific tools to do it, because flowers need, like, trowels and watering cans to be planted. If there are any tools dictated on the cards, you can use their special abilities. And these are things like trowels, which will allow you to plant flowers, or gloves, which will allow you to re-roll some of the dice that you've already taken into your wheelbarrow. In a 2 or 3 player game, there'll be 1 card left over, and that card is where you're going to place a token for sort of the dummy player that's going to be playing, taking up spaces so you don't get points. Ooh. In a 4 player game, you're only going to put out 4 cards, and there won't be any dummy player tokens that are placed out. Each of the sections in each of the herb gardens is going to have a requirement for how many herbs or pairs of herbs need to be discarded to be able to place your token into that. So in the dissimilar herbs garden, there may be a section for like 4 dissimilar herbs or 5 dissimilar herbs or 6 dissimilar herbs. And the ones that require more herbs are obviously going to give you more points at the end of the game. But once you place your token there, if all the spaces are full for that number, you cannot place a token there any longer. The flower garden has spaces for 3 of each flowers, and they are going to be decreasing in point value, so the first person to plant a forget-me-not is going to get more points than the third person. You are going to keep planting herbs and flowers until that deck of cards that indicates which dice are going to be placed on the cards and which tools you get runs out, at which point you are going to count up all of the points that you've earned from the tokens you've placed into the community garden. The person who was first to place a token in each of the 4 sections of the garden will also have collected a lemonade card, which is going to be 2 extra points at the end of the game, and you will get some points for any leftover groups of herbs or flowers that you have in your wheelbarrow. You will total up all of those sources of points, and whoever has the most points is the best community gardener and wins Herbaceous Sprouts.
Good job. You made a pretty garden today.
Have some lemonade.
I'll start out. The production on Herbaceous Sprouts is really strong. The art is great. If you've seen Herbaceous, a lot of similar and the same art has been used. So great drawings of all of the different kinds of herbs. It's beautifully illustrated. The tool cards that are new are illustrated well as well. You've got these nice dice that are pretty easy to read. There's references for them everywhere, so you can get a good idea. One thing I do really like is that on the player aid, it tells you what the special side is on each of the colors of dice, and that's super cool and super helpful. So you can kind of manage your dice, especially once you get those reroll powers. You're going to be looking at those dice and say, oh, I really need a green die, so I can take that and then I can get a reroll and hope I get what I need. So really good synergy on a lot of stuff there. The game itself is a very similar way to Herbaceous, the card game, to me. Obviously you got a little bit more in that you're working on that cooperative garden and you're working around other players, but it's kind of that replaces the card drafting of Herbaceous to me, and that's the interaction element of this particular game. I find them both about the same level of weight, and I feel like, depending on how you're feeling, you could play either of them in the same amount of time and for the same amount of mood.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit more control that you have in Herbaceous Sprouts as opposed to regular Herbaceous. In regular Herbaceous, you're just drawing cards off the top of the deck and either taking them into your hand or flipping them out for everybody else to be able to take later in the game. But you are very much beholden to what comes up off the top of that deck. It's weird, when they added the dice and they also added more control, so the dice game feels the more controlled one to me.
Okay.
Because you have rerolls that are going to allow you to reroll the dice a good number of times, and there are some tools which are packages which allow you to exchange a specific herb for anything else, or sometimes any herb for anything else. So you have a little bit of control if you take those. There are also some flower pots, which are tools which are on cards, and those work like the resources in Splendor, where once you've taken them onto your tableau in front of you, you have that resource perpetually, one every round, for the rest of the game. So if I have 2 tarragon flower pots, I know I have 2 tarragon that I can work with going forward. I don't need to keep it in my wheelbarrow, which is a limited amount of resources. There are only 7 spaces there. And I know that that is something that I can rely on for the rest of the game. So between the rerolls and those flower pots and the watering can, which allows you to change 2 herbs into the opportunity to plant a flower, you can get those exchange packages. There's a lot of control, even though you have a dice element.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that they are very similar weight, and that really, depending on your mood, you could play either, but I feel like if you like a little bit more control in your game, you're probably going to want to play Sprouts as opposed to regular.
I gotcha. Another thing that I really like that kind of comes to control, talking about the cards in a 2 or 3 player game, the card that's left over is going to determine where what rival sprout is it called, I think,
Yes.
something like that. It determines where that will go, and that's a mechanic I really enjoy. I love it when the drafting has an additional feature to it that affects all players instead of just the thing that I'm taking that stops them from taking other stuff. And this is something we talk about in Seasons, is being very powerful. The game is moved forward depending on what card is not taken, and I really, really appreciate that mechanic being in here. Again, it's another layer of control you have in a game that has a good bit of randomness to it with the card draws and the die rolling.
If you're not a huge fan of Push Your Luck, Herbaceous Sprouts may be a better option for you as well. Because in regular Herbaceous, you can only plant in each garden a single time. Once you've planted into the dissimilar herbs garden once, you can never go back and score that again.
Okay.
In Herbaceous Sprouts, as long as you have the herbs or flowers to place there, you can plant in each section of the garden as many times as you are able to do so.
Yeah.
So it takes away that sort of, should I do it now or should I wait a little bit longer? The only competition is whether or not you can get there before another player gets there or the rival sprout. You're not trying to see if maybe you should hold out a little longer to be able to grab a whole bunch of cards and plant that only one time in a garden.
Right. One thing I also appreciated about it is that you can choose your path to victory on this. For example, I had one game where I played where my only goal was I wanted to get the biggest point value out of, I think, 2 of the different gardens. I had the most diverse and I had the most possible pairs, or most possible of the same kind. And I was actually able to win that game attacking that strategy. I had 0 of the flower pot add-ons, for example, by the end of the game, because I focused just on developing 2 or 3 huge point scoring things. But I have seen players also win by just getting more on the board and then also getting that lemonade card so that they're able to max out their score that way and kind of, get the board crowded out so other players can't get in there and score.
I think of the 2, I would prefer the original game because I really like the decision of whether you're going to take the first card that you get and keep it for your garden or you're going to put it out for everybody else, and when are you going to take the cards from the center to be able to make sure that you get what you want before somebody else takes them. Herbaceous Sprouts just felt a little bit less tense to me, and I like that tension in the original Herbaceous game. The nice, light gardening theme made it so it wasn't overly stressful, but there was definitely, do I take this now, or do I wait a little bit longer? Is this the card I want, or do I want to see what the next card there is? That interesting sort of will I, won't I type of decision is what made that first game really great for me.
I think I'd probably also pick basic Herbaceous just because of the portability as well. Obviously, just a deck of cards and a few little components here and there. Super portable. It's a game that's permanently in our quiver. But at the same time, I like having Herbaceous Sprouts, and that would be a good game to bring people in who like to roll dice. And, kind of that good entry-level gateway, and also just a good filler game between other things when you want something that's more than just a deck of cards. So yeah, Herbaceous Sprouts, it should be available on store shelves really soon, if it's not already, since we just got that from Kickstarter last month.
Our final recent play of the episode is On Tour, which is a 2019 release from BoardGameTables.com. But it is not a table, it is a game. And it plays it says 1 to 4 players, but you can definitely get this up to 12 because the only restriction on the game is how many boards you have, and they will sell you extra boards.
Oh yeah, you could go to infinity if you desired. Don't do that.
It plays in 15 to 25 minutes. It's designed by Chad Deshawn, and the art is by Anka Gavril. This is a roll and write, which has route building and cutting out huge swaths of the country because you're messed up with your tour. Oops.
Yes. Side note real quick, you say it's not a table, but it is. The box is so big and sturdy that you probably could use this as a small table if you needed to.
It's the size of a shoebox. It's not that big.
It's bigger than you would expect for a roll and write. I think you would agree
That's
with
true.
that. So On Tour is, like you said, a roll and write game where you have this really nice kind of 3-panel brochure, fold open, hard-backed roll and write laminated dry erasable board. It's way more produced than I expect a roll and write to be. You also have obviously your marker, and you're going to be rolling 2 giant chunky dice that will tell you where to write. I'll explain the board first. The board is a map of the continental United States, no Alaska, no Hawaii, and it's split up by generally states. Some smaller states are clumped together, like you have New England area, for example, is all one thing, and each of them have a little circle in them, and I don't know, you probably got like 40 or 42 or something different circles on the board. You also have it divided into two different kind of ways. You have a north-south divide. Some of the states are in the north, some are in the south, and then you have a 3 vertical divide where you have the Midwest, you have the Far West, and you have the East. I guess this Midwest is central.
Yes, it is central.
Fair enough. So west, central, and east. You also, in this game, have a deck of cards, and each card on that has one of the 5 region splits and also one of the states in that region. So you might have North Washington, and you might also have a card that's West Washington. Each turn of the game, you're going to flip over 3 of these cards, and you're going to roll 2 big chunky D10. And from that, you're going to then decide where you're going to place some numbers. You're going to take the 2 numbers, so if I rolled like a 3 on one and a 7 on the other, I'm going to write 37 and 73 in 2 different states, dictated by the cards that are out. I have to place that number in one of the regions of one of the cards. So again, if I have that North Washington card, I can place it anywhere in the North region. I could choose to place 37 literally anywhere in the North. If I choose to place it in Washington, I also get to circle that particular number, which will get me more points at the end of the game. That's good. For the second number, 73, I'll have to choose one of the other 2 cards and do a similar thing. All of this is in service of building a tour route. Basically, you're going on a 100-day tour, and you're going to be filling states with numbers from 0 to 100, and then at the end of the game, once everything is filled in, drawing a line starting from the lowest number to the highest number by taking steps to adjacent states that are either the same number or one that is higher. You cannot double back, you cannot cross over your route, so you have to be really smart with your placement and choose, like, I'm going to place all of my low numbers in the Pacific Northwest and hopefully get all my high numbers at Florida, but that never is actually going to happen, and you're going to end up cutting off giant chunks like the entire Southeast. Doomtree, please come and tour our city.
Stop now.
You're also going to do a little bit of setup in that you're going to roll the dice twice at the beginning of the game to give you some seed cities that kind of give you an idea of where you're going to start. And then also there is one special fun function, is that you ever roll doubles on the dice, instead of putting a number, you get to put a star in the city of that region. And then it is a wild number that you can choose to use however you want. And that's good, because wild numbers are much easier to go through than 37. Mm-hmm. At the end of the game, you will be counting up your tour route for stops you've made in cities. You get an additional point per circled city, and pretty much you were played on tour. And if you're a good band, you hit all the good cities, and maybe you got a bunch of different cities. You probably didn't.
I was going to say, if you've actually played on tour, you don't hit all the different cities.
No, not at all. Pretty much like normal tours. I got maybe like 15 to 20 cities in every tour.
There you go.
All right, yeah, that is On Tour. So I joked a little in the beginning about how you could use this box as a table, but I really do want to comment about how strong the production quality of this is.
Definitely.
These individual player boards are really nice. They're like a full board thickness and, trifold boards here and really, big, colorful. You've got the dry erase markers included in the box, and the box itself can fit up to 12 of the boards. It comes with 4 as a base, but you can add on 4 packs. I actually added on additional 4 packs. We have 8 boards. I don't know why I just decided 12 would be too much, but honestly, if we had 12 in that box, I could probably knock somebody out with it because it would be so dense and heavy. It's way heavier and bigger than you expect a roll and write to be, which is good. You get good quality product, so I commend them for that.
And all of the boards, each set of boards comes with 4 different tours. So you've got a country tour, a hip-hop tour, a jazz tour, and a rock tour. They've all got different reflective shapes on the outside to go with the type of music. And on the inside, the art is done differently depending on what tour you're doing. And it's not the country. The map is always the same, but there is just sort of flavor art that is different depending on which one you have. So you feel sort of like your style of music. There's no functional difference, but it is a fun thing that you get to do. And maybe if you're playing with more than 4 players, or if you're playing with 4 players and people chose the same thing, you can be like, well, my hip-hop tour is better than your hip-hop tour. But it's just unnecessary but fun. I like it a lot. And you joke about how it's heavy and that the box is big, but honestly, I'd rather have 8 dry erase fold-out boards that I can use over and over and over again than have to worry about buying more pads or laminating sheets off a pad, because not everybody has access to a laminator. And this way, you don't even have to worry about it. If you need to get new dry erase markers, you can. It's a lot easier to get dry erase markers than it is to get a new pad for a specific game. You can just get them off Amazon or go to the store or whatever. But I do think it's kind of weird that these dry erase markers have white erasers on them, so they immediately look dirty the first time you use them. But that's a stupid small quibble that I just happened to notice. The cards are also nice tarot size cards, so everybody's going to be able to see them and see which state is on them. They're done with nice artwork. The box cover artwork is on the back of each of the cards. It's a great made game.
Yeah. The game itself is also fun. It's not a super heavy roll and write. My biggest frustration with this game is that there's no way to really mitigate the dice. And I said 37 and 73, not just because they were the first numbers I could think of, but because I felt like the same numbers came up a lot on the dice. And there was no way for me to really do anything with that if the region didn't work out to be well.
I mean, it's about how you place things to leave yourself regions to place stuff that you aren't going to be able to use.
Fair.
Like in the last game that I played, I knew fairly early on in the game that I was not going to get to Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. Like I had placed my numbers in a way that was not going to allow that to be the case.
Yeah.
The corners of the map are obviously a little bit more difficult to get into. Like you had said, New England is an entire region. But that's because if you were able to go up into Maine through like Vermont and Massachusetts, like getting back out of that would be incredibly difficult. So I knew early in the game I wasn't going to be able to use Florida. So anytime I got a number that I really couldn't use, I'd throw it down in that region I had already known was not going to be able to be useful to me.
Makes sense.
And you need to really mitigate it and plan for what you're going to do and what you're not going to do fairly early in the game. And maybe you'll luck into something that allows you to connect extra. But you need to be able to be aware of what you can and can't do at any point in the game.
Yeah, and being able to place adjacent numbers and know that you're going to be able to use both of those together is really helpful. That's something that I didn't quite remember in the first game we played and may have contributed to a much worse tour than I wanted. But yeah, all in all, it's a quick playing roll and write. It's pretty easy to teach, and it plays quick. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot else to say about it. What do you got anything else to bring up about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked this game. I think it was themed in a way that made it seem like I was doing something other than placing numbers, but really all I was doing was placing numbers. The fact that it had that map and it wasn't just a track of numbers that I was placing in an increasing or decreasing order made it feel like I was doing something that was a little bit more fun, but at the end of the day, it was the equally brain-burning puzzle. You had to make sure that you had the things that you needed where they needed to be, and that you had sort of escape routes in case you got numbers that were not going to work out for you, but you had to place based on the cards.
Yeah.
I actually really liked this game. I got to play it at one of our recent game nights again, and at the end of it, everybody sort of was surprised at how well they had done, even though they had been planning for it. Like, you get one number, and it can include a whole new section of your tour, or maybe you don't get a number and you're like, oh, well, I just lost 3 states in the process of that. It's not the most innovative roll and write we've seen. I mean, stuff like Welcome to has a lot more going on in there. But I think for a roll and write game that is easy to teach but has fun flavor to get people who've not played it, this is a good one.
Oh, okay. I think I do have one more thing to say, kind of what you're based on what you were saying right there. The theme and the flavor, like this really did kind of feel weirdly like tour planning to me, and now I have a little bit more kind of empathy for bands that don't tour in my area, because I'm, I really imagine it's a lot like this. It's just like, well, I mean, do we have anything that's going to go on between days 32 and 36? What are the odds that we're going to be able to get a stop in Tennessee or something? It's weird how thematic that feels for me at the end of the game, that I'm just like, well, I'm just sorry. Like, we really wanted to get a spot over here, but literally a venue did not come up, which is, like the number didn't come up. It feels right in that way. Obviously very abstracted. I don't feel like I'm a band in any way by doing this, but it felt an interesting thematic tie to the route planning there. Mm-hmm. So along with that, I feel like it's appropriate for us to put On Tour on tap.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun to say.
On Tour on tap right now. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net.
So in case you don't remember from before the break, our on tap game is going to be On Tour, which is a 2019 release from BoardGameTables.com. It plays technically 1 to 12 players in 15 to 25 minutes. Designer is Chad Deshawn. The artist is Anka Gavriel. And this is a roll and write, route building, cutting out huge spots of the country game.
So first up, from Vagabond Brewing in Salem, Oregon, we have On the Road Red. It's a red ale that clocks in at 5.4% ABV and 30 IBU. This is an English-style amber with British ale yeast, but West Coast hops for spiciness, and they have it available on draft in the area.
Our second beer is from Microphone Brewing in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. This is On the Road Again. So we had On the Road, now we have On the Road Again.
On the Road Again.
It is a Saison that comes in at 6% ABV. It was previously called Travelin' Man, so if you've tried that, this is going to be the same beer. Mm-hmm. It is a dry hopped Saison with Enigma hops that is available in 750 milliliter bottles and has rotating availability.
Ooh, an Enigma. I like Microphone a lot. They do great stuff. I want to find this beer.
That is actually why this is on the sit. It is rotatingly available, which means it's not currently available, but it does come out regularly, so check around if you see it. This is a good one.
I will be checking the binnies for that next time I'm in Illinois. From Peachtree Brewing Company in Knoxville, Iowa?
Yeah.
Iowa? There's a Knoxville in Iowa?
Yes.
Today I learned. Then we have Sound Check, which is a session IPA at 4.9% ABV. This is an easy drinking session IPA with a portion of the proceeds going to support growing the music scene in central Iowa. It's on draft now, but some previous bottle availability on this one means you might see it again as it warms up.
Yeah, their post on their news section had said, we're releasing these bottles now that the weather's warm again. So it is currently available on draft in some of their tap rooms. They have, I think, 4 different tap rooms. So it is available on some of them, but you might be seeing this in bottles again.
Iowa.
Yes, Iowa.
Okay, I didn't know
You've taken your tour through Iowa.
I guess. I didn't know there was a Knoxville in Iowa. Today I learned.
Next up, from Holmes Brewery in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we have Laser Light Show, because after you do the sound check, you have your Laser Light Show. This is a double IPA that has 8% ABV. It is brewed with Galaxy and Citra hops for strong tropical citrus flavors and a creamy texture. It is available in 16-ounce cans, which look really cool because a Laser Light Show can should look pretty cool.
Beer I would like to drink you. Finally, we have a beer from Southern Tier Brewing Company in Lakewood, New York. It is Citra Hopped Live Pale Ale. It's an American Pale Ale at 5.5% ABV and 37 IBU. This is obviously brewed with Citra hops, but also some malt breadiness. They seem really focused on this accompanying live music as well.
Yeah, every time they have a description, it's like, we really wanted to make a beer that went well with live music. And I guess that makes sense. A pale ale is a great beer to drink if you're at a concert or something like that. It's not overly, super strong and forward. Mm-hmm. You can drink it and just enjoy what's going on around you and still be like, oh, this is a good beer. It tastes nice, but it's not, overwhelming. I don't need to get the really fine flavors that are in there that are delicate. And live is a good beer.
Yeah, and this is available in all sorts of shapes, most notably the 12-ounce cans. I've seen live in bottles. I've seen it in bombers. Southern Tier puts stuff in packaging. That's pretty much what you need to know out of this. All right, well, if you need information on any and all of those beers, you can go to the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. Just hit the website, hit the button up at the top that says show notes, or click on the picture for this episode, which is episode 95, Keyforge. And speaking of Keyforge, I think it is time for us to move on to our six-pack review, perhaps of Keyforge?
Perhaps.
Let's do this thing. After a word from our sponsors.
Hey Jake, have you ever wondered what would happen if the moon, which was actually an ancient dragon god that was all riled up because warriors were trying to get rid of the gods, crashed into the Pacific Ocean and opened a rift that put humans in a post-apocalyptic state and mutated all the animals to have crazy abilities?
I can't say I've had exactly that thought.
Well, in Tsukiyumi, you and your friends will take the role of soldiers and giant boars, a robot army, mutated roaches, and the descendants of ancient dragon slayers, each using your own abilities to bid for opportunities to accomplish your, moon goals.
And when can I accomplish these moon goals?
Gray Fox Games is bringing Tsukiyumi to Kickstarter in mid-March 2019, so keep your eye out lest you anger the dragon moon god further.
Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Somewhere out there in the world right now, Alex Goldsmith from the Dukes of Dice is very interested to know if I have any good words to say about Keyforge. But before we get to that moment, first I must introduce the game, and then Danielle will tell us how Keyforge is played. So Keyforge, Call of the Archons, is a 2018 release from Fantasy Flight Games. It plays 2 players in 15 to 45 minutes. This is designed by Richard Garfield, and the artists are not listed on Board Game Geek, which is dumb because there's like a ton of art in this thing, but all of the artists are on the cards, so that is nice. And as you're looking at the cards, you can always look down there and just like, oh, that person.
I appreciate this person's artwork.
Mm-hmm. This is a dueling card game with unique decks and Renpenny, the queen of the castle. Danielle?
Which is one of our unique decks that I happen to really like the name of.
All right, let's talk about some keys.
Okay, so Keyforge is a unique card game, which I'm sure you've heard by this point. In order to get into Keyforge, what you have to do is you have to buy a deck of Keyforge cards. You don't buy just Keyforge cards, you buy a deck. So you go to the store and you buy a little pack, and it has a specific name for the deck.
Vinci the Fearless.
For instance, that. And it will have a group of cards. Each deck comes with a list of what the cards are that are included, and they are all built up of 3 different suits, or what are in Keyforge called houses. Each of the houses have sort of their own flavor, so any deck that includes shadows is going to have the shadows flavor to those cards. You have all these different houses that are going to be grouped together in sets of 3. You will get a deck which is not like any other deck of Keyforge that has ever existed.
Empress Prisha Shadow Smasher.
Which was a pretty good deck in the tournament yesterday. And you are going to be taking that deck and matching it up against another unique Keyforge deck. This is a dueling card game, so obviously you are going to be playing against one other player. Like we said, it's a 2-player game.
Diana Wadka from the Baron's Forest.
On each turn in a game of Keyforge, the first thing you're going to do is attempt to forge a key if you have 6 of the resource which is called Ember that you are collecting throughout your plays. If you can do so, you must do so at the current value, at which point you are going to call a house. It will likely be one of the houses from your deck. If you've captured any cards from your opponent's deck which are of a different house, it can also be of that house if you like. But usually it's going to be one of your 3 houses. Then you're going to be able to play or use any cards that are in your hand or already played out on the table in front of you, which are from that house. A lot of the cards have a special ability, which is listed on the bottom of them, or they will have an attack power, which can be used to attack the creatures of the other player. Some of the cards are artifacts, which will give you an ability as well, but they are not used to attack, and there are certain one-time action cards. Some of the cards in each of the decks have additional Ember that you will get just for playing the card, not for doing any of the actions on them, just for having it go into play. And you are attempting to incapacitate the creatures of your other player, but more importantly gain Ember, because if the other player has no creatures out, you can't ever attack them as a person. Like, it's not like Magic where you can reduce the health of the other player at any point to win the game. You are only trying to get their creatures off the board so that they can't use those creatures to generate Ember, because one of the things that you can do on a turn is if you call a house and you've got a bunch of creatures of that house, you can use them to just reap, which is going to generate an Ember plus any abilities that they have that say reap. Once you have played or used all the cards of the house that you've called, you are going to then draw your hand back up to your hand size, which will vary depending on the number of chains your deck has. Chains are used as a balancing mechanic to account for the fact that some of these decks are naturally going to be stronger than others based on the fact that they're pre-generated, or perhaps to make you be at a little bit of a disadvantage for having used a particularly strong card on a previous turn. Once you've redrawn your hand, you are going to ready any cards that you used on that turn so that they are available when your opponent starts their turn, and then you will pass the turn to the other player, and you'll continue going back and forth until one player has forged all 3 of the keys which they need to forge to win the game. At that point, they are the winner, and you should probably just play again.
Thuau, spawn of Zaito,
Indeed, Thuau.
the champion of Serpent Corner.
Thank you for not interrupting when I was talking half.
Rip Skipper, the Viking of Belton.
Are you quite done?
These names are weird. I mean, like, we didn't get any, like, super crazy weird names.
We didn't get any with, like, numbers in them, no.
Keyforge. So, those of you who have been listening for a little while probably know that I played a game of Keyforge at PAX Unplugged with Alex from the Dukes of Dice, in which he gave me his bad deck of the 2 decks. It took about 10 minutes, and I did nothing except move cards to my discard pile. I swore off Keyforge immediately, but here we are, reviewing it for a 6-pack. So, Danielle, initial thoughts on Keyforge from you. How are you feeling about it after 1 or 2 plays?
Well, my initial thought is that I think you are putting too much blame on Alex, because you're just not very good at this game.
You're not wrong, and I will give you that as kind of the initial lead-off thoughts here as well. I'm not good at dueling card games, y'all, and being set up at a significant disadvantage at learning a new card game may have spoiled my appetite for the game a little bit. But I will say, after playing a little bit and playing in tournament yesterday, we did went down to a local tournament and did kind of like a pod. What is that?
It was a sealed deck pod.
Sealed, yeah, there you go. I don't know the words for these things. I don't know this concept. It's so weird and foreign to me. But after playing a bunch of those games, I actually found myself really enjoying it, and enjoying it more as I finally figured out how cards work.
Yeah. The way we were actually playing in tournament, I think, sets up a really nice explanation of how chains work in general, and I did say I'd get back to that, so I want to talk about that a little bit. We had an 8-person pod, and the store opened 8 decks from the boxes, but they were still shrink-wrapped, so you had to know what the names of the cards were, but you could see the houses that were in each of the decks. And then what they did is they auctioned off each of the decks for a number of chains. This was a charity tournament, so that you had to pay a certain amount for each chain that you bid, which they were donating to a charity for one of the regulars who had passed away. So that was nice to see that your money was going to a good cause. But the way it worked was, like, if I really wanted a deck, I could bid a certain number of chains, and whoever bid the highest number of chains would have to play with that many chains at the beginning of the game for every game that they played that day. What that did was, if a deck was generally better, people were bidding more for it because they wanted to be able to use it, but chains decrease the amount of cards that you draw every turn while you have them. Every time you draw at a reduced rate, you're going to shed one of your chains. So if you start with, say, 5 chains, you are going to have 5 on your first draw and then 4 on your second draw and so on. And eventually you'll have none.
Yay.
But it is decreasing your options. This is something that they are using in tournament play as an official balancer as well. If your deck wins a lot of organized play events, it may be assigned chains that it needs to have at the beginning of every game. They also say in the rulebook, if you're just playing casually and you find that you have a deck that is better than the other decks that you own, just like you've gotten one that's very good, that you can assign it 4 chains at the beginning, or you could do this same kind of bidding thing where you bid chains to play that deck, so that whoever has the stronger deck is at a disadvantage, and it can balance out what you have. You don't have to go out and buy another deck if you don't have equal decks. You can just balance it using this chains mechanic, which I think is really neat, because when we first heard about Keyforge, that was what I was most worried about, that you would go out and you just have to keep buying decks until you got a good deck in order to be able to even play this casually and not just get your butt kicked every single time. But I like the fact that they give you a way to balance it out in the game in both competition and casual play.
So, kind of talking about the construction of decks in general and the way that the decks are made, this is something that has always been intriguing about Keyforge to me. We talked about this in our 2018 year-end wrap-up. I called Keyforge the most innovative game of 2018, having only played it the 1 or 2 times. But the uniqueness of the decks makes this really interesting to any kind of player. Those who want to get in and just with one deck and just play with that deck, there's an opportunity for that, because another player can't really go out and tweak their deck so that they spent $5,000 on this deck by assembling a bunch of cards just to get a perfect combination of stuff. It kind of levels it out a little bit. Additionally, with the chains there. One thing I will say is that it's really easy to just buy additional decks and then over a period of time decide, well, I'm never going to use Renpenny again, which is the only name I could think of real quick. I don't really remember how good that one was compared to other ones.
I think we've only played it like twice.
But it is interesting in a way that you can get in at the price point you are comfortable with, and I think that that is a positive overall for Keyforge, which is something I initially thought was going to be a negative, that you had to buy $10 every time you wanted to do anything more. One other note on production, all of the cards are really clearly laid out. I think they did a great job with the iconography, with power and armor and each of the different houses, both having unique colors and symbols, so everything is super clear that you can pick up and learn easily in a few rounds of the game.
Yeah, the only thing I can sort of have a little bit of a issue with as far as the layout of the cards is that because the abilities that you have a bold face on the time that you can use them. So perhaps if you have a reap ability, it will say reap in bold. There are also some other keywords that are not bolded that can make it a little bit difficult to see, especially if you've got poor vision or you're in a low light environment. Particularly things like elusive, which means that when a character is attacked, the first time it's attacked, no damage is dealt.
Yeah.
That's something you really need to know if you're an opponent player, because you're not going to attack that if you really need damage done. But the keywords are not the most clear if you are not very close to them or not well written. That's easily solved. Like in the games we were playing yesterday, every time I played a card that said it was elusive, I said to my opponent, I was like, I'm playing this, it has elusive. I'm playing this, it has skirmish.
Yeah.
So at least like they were told and they could see. I mean, it's written on the cards, but if you're playing across a fairly wide table, or I said like you have a vision problem or it's low light, those keywords can be a little bit difficult to see.
Well, I hope that they make some changes with that with the next set coming out. You know, they are hopefully going to continue supporting this with new content, so maybe that will happen. But we have talked a lot about the production of this game. I think we should probably talk about the gameplay at some point during this review.
Yeah, sure.
Danielle, tell me about how you feel about the gameplay of Keyforge.
I actually really like it quite a bit, which is why we're doing the 6-pack review. Because when we first played this, if I had been like Jake, do you want to do a 6-pack review? I have a feeling the answer would have been, no, I don't want to play this game a bunch more times.
I don't want to play this stupid game, Smithison.
But I was really excited about it when I got to play it, and I really wanted to play more and get a feeling for how this game plays, and I'm really, really glad I did.
Yeah.
This game solves one of my main problems with dueling card games, which is the idea that you can have a mana drought in the early part of the game that can just absolutely crush you for the rest of the game. If you're playing Magic and you don't get land at the beginning, like you get a hand that has maybe 2 or 3 and then you just stall out on land draws, it can feel really frustrating if you're drawing high power cards, especially depending on what type of deck you're playing. Here, you never have to worry about having resources or not having the resources to play something yet, because you have the availability from the very beginning of all 3 of your houses, and you can play as many cards as you have in your hand or have on the table in front of you from that house whenever you call it. Now, there are some cards that will restrict the houses you can call, but that's a specific tactical choice and maneuver that your opponent has done to play that card, so I don't feel as restricted at that point. But most of the time, if I need to be able to play a card, I can do it on the next turn. It's just whether or not the value I'm going to get from calling that house is going to outweigh the value I would get from calling a different house that I may already have more creatures on the board from, or more cards in my hand that are not necessarily super valuable right now, but there's more of them and I can get them all out.
I agree completely, and that's my favorite thing about Keyforge is you can play anything you want at any time, given that you call that house. That's one of my biggest frustrations with a lot of other kinds of these games is just like, I gotta work and build up to this card, and especially if you get to the point in these deck construction games where you have a decently sized deck, it's luck of the draw that maybe you draw only endgame cards, cards you need that are super expensive or super powerful. In this, honestly, being able to call any card, and also the fact that it's a small deck, it's 36 cards in the deck, means that you're going to be getting stuff you can play pretty much any time, given that you've built your, strategy so far by knowing your deck so that you're set up to use stuff effectively.
The other thing about that is that you cannot do damage to somebody or gain any benefit to yourself by running through somebody's entire deck.
Yes.
So if I get a bunch of cards that are late game cards for me, that require other stuff to have already been played or allow me to use artifacts that the other player has and they haven't played any yet, I can always call that house, play what I need from that house, and then discard. You can always discard cards from your hand from the house that you've called. And I can just cycle them for later in the game, because almost all of the games that I played in the last couple of weeks that we've been playing this, I was shuffling my deck at least once. So not generally more than once unless it was against a very defensive deck and we were both sort of running a very long defensive strategy. But a lot of times you are going through that deck, most of it, twice. So if I get, a whole bunch of late game cards in my hand early in the game, I can call that house and chuck them out and hopefully get them back later. Or maybe if I have something that has the archive ability, I can archive them for later. But I'm not completely giving up those options. I am just going to be able to shuffle my deck when it runs out, and hopefully I'll draw them again and I'll be able to use them later. Mm-hmm. But at least you're keeping your hand fresh and you're keeping it moving at that point.
It's been really interesting as well to kind of watch the meta develop on a game like this where you don't get to change what's in your deck. As time goes on and people get new decks and they find new ways that existing cards work together, people are actually going back and looking at decks that they had written off and saying, oh, wow, so if I do this in this way, this is actually going to work in an interesting way. And some of that is probably just that Keyforge is super new right now, and it's going to be really reliant on Fantasy Flight to continue to support this with new ways to, A, include new content like in the new set, and B, find a way to make old cards viable in any way to really prolong the life for this game. Because it's entirely possible that there's a combo with, Bad Penny and Seeker Needle is one that I've heard. Bad Penny goes back into your hand, and Seeker Needle deals 1 damage, you get an Ember for it. So if you have, those cards, you can kind of cycle that out for Ember constantly. And I had that in one of my decks, which was a really cool combination. And I'm interested to see in future sets if there is a way to keep those combos viable, or if it's always going to be new combos and new stuff, pretty much making it so that your old decks don't get to do the hotness.
Well, I don't know about old decks, but even in addition to the older cards that are coming forward into the new set, the press release for the new set of cards had said that there is a chance that any cards from the original Call of Archon set can be pulled forward as legacy cards, which work similar to the way that Mavericks work in the current deck. And there is a chance that anything, not only the 166 cards that they're pulling forward, are going to be able to be brought forward, not on the regular, but on sort of a one-off thing. So you may get really neat combos with the cards that are from the original set, just on those legendary decks.
So even though the Age of Ascension set is based in, whatever new fixed 380 or something cards, other cards from the past might just appear in your decks?
That's what the press release said.
That is weird and crazy, and I like it. But again, that does mean that your old deck pretty much gets to sit on a shelf gathering dust somewhere. Maybe, we'll find out later on that those new decks are balanced, or whatever new keywords, newer mechanics are balanced in a certain way. And I think you brought up the point that while they might be adding new keywords, it's entirely possible that they take some keywords away in this set. I think that would be a really smart way to balance it moving forward.
Yeah, and not to say that you can never use your old decks, because it's entirely possible that some of the old decks are really good at beating some of the new stuff in certain ways, because each house has its own flavor. Like, it's still entirely possible that if you have a group of houses that works really well against a new deck that has a different group of houses, you're still going to be able to use it and play competitively. I mean, this is always true of dueling card games. You're going to play better with a deck that is slightly less good, that you are really good at playing, than you're going to play with a new deck that you're not as good at playing with, that it may have slightly stronger cards. So I have a feeling people are still going to be pulling out their Call of Archons even after Age of Ascension comes out.
One thing that was also interesting for me to wrap my mind around when playing Keyforge is that this game is not about getting creatures on the field entirely. And the tournament we were at yesterday, one of the people there kept yelling out, it's Keyforge, not Keyfight. And that's something that took me a little while to get into as I'm playing Keyforge. It's not about having 10 creatures on the table unless you're effectively able to use them to generate Ember. Because even if they're capturing Ember from the other player, or just, doing stuff like that, or being super strong, none of those things get the Ember into your pool to allow you to build keys. So it's hard for me, or it was hard for me, to kind of get to that point where I'm looking at big creatures and I'm like, oh, this thing is super cool, and realize that, oh, this thing, it's not super useful at this time, so I want to discard it and move on.
Well, every creature can be useful if you call its house, because you can always use it to perform that reap action, which is going to give you 1 Ember. But what that means is you can't use it to fight. And there were definitely points in my games where I looked at the other player's battle line, which is their group of creatures, and I knew there was absolutely nothing I could do to clear that battle line.
Yeah.
There was creatures that were 2 or 3 times as strong as anything in front of me, and I wasn't going to be able to get through that armor in any way that was going to be really useful to me. So instead, I maintained, I was just reaping with everything I had and hoping that I could play a bunch of cards that gave me additional Ember and gave me the ability to deactivate some of those creatures so that they couldn't be used to reap. You know, if you stun a creature, it has to spend its next turn just readying itself again, getting up from being stunned. So I was hoping that I could get around that without having to fight my way through those additional creatures. And if you can do that, then you are able to forge those keys effectively, even if you can't fight necessarily all the creatures which are in front of you on the opponent.
Okay, so final thoughts on Keyforge. I'll start out. I was skeptical about Keyforge. I initially hated it after one play, situationally probably more than anything else. But even in that one play, I saw, okay, maybe there's a nugget in here that I could enjoy. We had a chance to play some of those decks at Whose Turn Is It Anyway a few weeks ago. We got our own, we got a feel for it, and I'm enjoying learning about the way that it works. I'm not going to say that I love Keyforge. I'm not going to say that this is a game for anybody, but it might be a game that people who have played dueling card games but got turned off by deck construction should give a look at. And that's kind of where I am right now. We had previously talked about Ashes and how cool and innovative we thought that was, but it's the kind of game that I haven't spent any time on because I don't have time to develop decks and think about the meta. With Keyforge, I don't have to do that. I just have to grab a deck, grab the tokens or, an app on the phone, and we can just sit down and play. And it plays quick, and it's easy to get in, to a groove with. I think it's also going to be perfect for tournaments because sealed deck tournaments are always more exciting, and it gets people to buy new product, and then you've got more Keyforge. And I think that's kind of their goal with this, is to get people to buy more Keyforge decks. And we've got 7 right now. We'll probably have more. And that's kind of how I feel about Keyforge. I'm going to get more of it.
We said at the beginning of the episode that we were going to talk about a bunch of different things that made it so that everybody could get involved, and Keyforge was one of them. I like that you have no deck construction element in Keyforge, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you can spend the time and money to make the best Keyforge deck possible, because you're never going to be able to change what you have in the deck that you buy. I think that really opens up who can play, because when you open up that deck, everybody just has what they have to be able to make the best game. And that's really fun and interesting to me, because essentially somebody who has spent $10 and no time on this game has a chance to play competitively with somebody who has spent a ton of money, because they could just get a really good deck, and as long as they have the skills to play a dueling card game decently, then they are going to be able to play a game. Obviously, like I said before, if you play with a deck more times, you're going to develop more strategy, but that doesn't necessarily require more money input or more out-of-game time input. I like this game, and I think it solves a lot of the problems people have with dueling card games, again, with lack of resources or with just not being able to acquire the best cards possible. And I'm interested to see what they continue to do with it. I would never have gone to a dueling card tournament for something like Magic, or even just online played in any of the online Hearthstone tournaments, because I know I'm not equipped to build an amazing deck and win or even play competitively in those. But we went to a Keyforge tournament yesterday, and it was a ton of fun, and I would definitely go to another one. And I think that says a lot for this game and what it can be doing for the hobby, and also just what Fantasy Flight has created here. This is a game I like way more than I thought I would, and I'm happy about it.
All right, well, that is our review of Keyforge. If you have any thoughts you want to share, join us in our Slack channel or on our Board Game Geek Guild, guild number 2470, and it's time for us to escape this review zone. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
So in our beer segment today, I wanted to talk about a couple of different programs that are aiming to increase the diversity in the craft beer world, because it is definitely something that needs to be looked at, and these are two, well, one is an initiative and one is a festival that I wanted to talk about and bring a little bit more attention to. The first is that the Brewers Association has just launched a new grant program to fund events that increase access and awareness of craft beer in new demographics. It is aiming to fund local and regional events that intentionally promote and foster a more diverse and inclusive craft beer community. These events include beer festivals, beer and food pairing events, agricultural fairs and celebrations, ethnic and cultural heritage festivals, neighborhood and community celebrations, entrepreneurship and innovation festivals, as well as film festivals. And so they are really reaching a broad net out there, and this grant can be used to provide up to 25% of the event's budget, which is not an insignificant amount of budget for this kind of event. The grant applications this year will be accepted from February 13th, which was obviously just this past week, until March 15th. And they are available online. I will obviously put a link to that in the show notes. So if you have the kind of event that you are aware of in your community, or you are attempting to get started, and it involves both craft beer and any of these type of culturally expanding events, this is a place where you can get a decent chunk of change to help you put that event on and share it with the community. I am all for this. I'm glad the Brewers Association is coming out and being like, hey, we are going to help these things because it is important to us. And I wanted to share that while the applications were still open. The second thing that I want to talk about is the Fresh Fest Beer Festival, which you can access at freshfestbeerfest.com, and it is billing itself as the nation's first Black Brew Festival. There are currently early bird tickets that are available, and if you buy your tickets before February 20th, which is the Wednesday after this episode drops, so you have 2 days if you're listening to this on day of drop, you get a t-shirt with your tickets. There are 3 different kinds of tickets. You have your general admission, you have some early admission tickets, and then there are a meet and greet with the brewer type of tickets that are, you know, your high pricey tickets. This is happening on August 10th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they had stated on their website, which again is freshfestbeerfest.com, 1 year after the game-changing 2018 festival, Fresh Fest returns with another amazing lineup of Black-owned breweries, as well as breweries collaborating with Black artists and entrepreneurs from Pennsylvania and beyond. Brewery, vendor, artist, and food truck submissions are open through the end of March, so March 31st. So I wanted to bring attention to this while they are still open as well. Last year, they had upwards of 30 breweries, as well as spirit brewers, cider, and mead producers. So if this is something that is interesting to you and you are available in the Pittsburgh area, or you can get to the Pittsburgh area, this is something you might want to check out.
That's awesome.
And I'm glad to see this is something the Brewers Association had sponsored last year, so that's how my attention was drawn to this. But I feel like everybody needs to know about this type of thing, and it is a great opportunity to increase the diversity that is in craft beer and for people to become familiar with diversity that already exists within craft beer. So, again, early bird tickets, free t-shirt, go check it out. Link will be in the show notes.
Cool. Well, thanks for bringing those to our attention today, Danielle. So, moving on to the final round, where we ask the Draft Mechanics Slack channel their thoughts on a particular topic. This one came to mind because we were going to be talking about Keyforge, so that's kind of resolution as to where this one came from. The question was, what's a game that you were wrong about? Something that you thought you'd like but hated, or a game you avoided but ended up loving? I'm not going to, again, not saying that I love Keyforge, but I did hate it, and now I don't hate it.
Our first answer comes from John Tyler. He said, I pretty much love every space-themed game I come across, but Zaya left me wishing I could have gotten a root canal instead. The randomness, with no mitigation, left me smashing my ship into planetary shields for 2+ hours.
Ooh, that's rough. Yeah, Zaya is a very luck-heavy game, no question about that, and you gotta know that going into it and make your peace with it. From Will Foy, he says, no fun stories, but as I look around the manloft/home office and see games that are less than thrilling, which haven't been traded to better, more loving homes, or reflect on those that have been KonMari'd to somewhere else, they tend to be of the type where I love the studio's work, but a game that left me flat. I enjoy Tiny Epic Galaxies and Tiny Epic Western a ton, but both Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea and Tiny Epic Defenders left me in the cold. Partly, I find that I just don't enjoy a pure 4X game as much as I would think, or a co-op that's as much of a gut punch, and partly because they just fizzled and overstayed their welcome at the table. Difficulty is fine, and making tough decisions with consequences is fine, but both of those, meh. As someone who enjoys playing new stuff and welcomes playtesting, I don't know that I shy away from much of anything, except on the basis of time or brain burniness at the wrong time. As in, don't play that killer 2+ hour game at 11 p.m. if you're not a night owl.
Ryan Quick said, Captain Sonar. Generally, I don't like the large table crowd, and find another evening of codenames and illustrations the kind of thing that makes me want to just stay home. But full interactive 8-player real-time Captain Sonar will get me out every time. It has all the you sunk my battleship memories from being a kid, the social deduction of figuring out their plans, plus great puzzles on the more advanced scenarios. It's not just a keeper. I bought it over and over as a gift for folks to help spread the love. That is definitely the best sign of a good game when you keep buying it for people. Like you've bought Vegas for at least 2 different people that we have, and it's a game that you love. So this is definitely high praise from Ryan here.
Yeah, I can definitely see Captain Sonar appealing to people that don't like those kind of games as well, because it is really a communication and strategy game more than a party game. Fiona from the Game Shelf says, Gloomhaven. I don't like fantasy, I don't like dungeon crawls, I don't like story-driven games, but for some reason Gloomhaven just works, and it's a top 10 game for me. I hear that a lot for Gloomhaven as well. Just the strength of the development in that game really has turned a lot of people onto that kind of giant, overarching story, massive box kind of game.
Chris Whitpan said, I really should like Macau, but I don't. I've tried and tried, but I just can't seem to get what everybody loves so much. At least you tried, Chris.
Yeah, at least you tried. That's not like how everybody expects me to love the band Vampire Weekend because I'm an indie rock kid, but I despise Vampire Weekend so much.
Okay.
Sometimes something checks all of your boxes, and it's just not good. And I don't like Vampire Weekend. They don't deserve to write a song about a comma.
Back to the plot, please.
Patrick Hillier rounds us out with, It is interesting to see Pret-a-Porter being reprinted. I played it years ago and thought playing a game about fashion was going to be weird and had avoided it, but I found it interesting, but I enjoyed it a lot and glad to see that they didn't retheme it in the reprint. I also had a seizure when playing my learning game of Hansa Teutonica. Pretty sure it wasn't the cause because that board is so beige, but I avoided playing it for several years afterward. I have finally played it seizure-free. He doesn't say if he likes it or not there, though.
No, but I mean, I imagine not having a seizure during playing it is definitely an improvement of one's opinion.
Absolutely. Well, if you have any thoughts that you would like to contribute, join us in our Slack channel or in our Board Game Geek Guild. It's guild number 2470, and you're always welcome to join us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on Facebook, Instagram, and what's the other one? Twitter. Got it.
If you happen to be local to Charlotte, we would love to see you at Salute Cerveceria tomorrow. If you're listening to this the day it drops, February 19th. If not, we will see you at Good Road Cider Works, hopefully on the first Thursday of March.
And you can always follow us on Facebook to see those events. We will post them on Facebook, and you can RSVP. You can also check out our games list. And a few days before, if you have anything you really want us to bring, I can always put those in the bag and bring them along. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Danielle, I'm getting kind of hungry. Can we go get lunch?
No, not yet. First, we have to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that we'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
All right, I'm good with that. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 95 was recorded on Sunday, February 17th, 2019 in front of a live studio cast.
Beauty's in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hi, this is Eric Buscemi, popping in to let you know about a continuing interview series I've been doing on the Punchboard Media website called In Focus, Perspectives in Board Gaming. I've been interviewing people that work in all different facets of the board game industry, such as designers Nikki Valens and Daniel Salas, artists Fernandez Suarez and Beth Sobel, board game publishers Anne-Marie DeWitt and Shari Spiro, and many other people with unique industry perspectives. Check out our interviews on the Punchboard Media website, www.punchboardmedia.com, where a new one is posted every Wednesday afternoon.
Punchboard Media, where we all
bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.